So hi, everyone. I'm Megan Wagner. I'm here with my friend Stephen Pope, and we're getting ready to have another series of classes on the Gospel of John, which follows the book that you've written, Steve, and we're really excited to do a series, however long that takes. And let's just talk a little bit about your wonderful book and some of the themes that we're going to be following.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people have questions about the main themes in the Gospel of John and what we might be covering. So can you give us a highlight of that?
Well, the book basically goes through the first 4 chapters, and it goes through the crucifixion, death, and resurrection. This is because it acts as a frame for whoever wants to read the gospel, the other sections of the gospel themselves. So really it's an exploration of the gospel as a manual, let's put it that way, for awakening to the divine within, to the your own spiritual body and your own connectivity with the great circle of life, as it's put in the gospel.
Mm-hmm. You know, I know one of the unique aspects of the Gospel of John is that it starts out talking about the Logos. And can you say a little bit about that?
Okay, well, I mean, obviously that's one of the main themes that we cover because it's unique to the gospel, how they use this word logos, really to describe the nothingness of the Holy One, the one consciousness out of which all life continually emerges. Creation continually emerges. And although it starts off talking about, the Greek is put in the past tense, in the beginning the Logos was, it is bringing us into the present moment. And the Logos is really described as being beyond time and space as our conceptual minds understand it. So it's outside of time, or put it another way, it's the timeless unity of all life, unification of all life, or unifier of all life, out of which creation, formation, and the physical universe of making us here arise. So, and that it's within us now. It's not something that we have to go into the past or look forward to in the future for. It's available to us now, accessible to us now.
Mm-hmm. So the power of coming into the present moment and being fully awakened. So it sounds like it's sort of a manual for how to fully awaken.
Yes, it's an enlightenment manual, if you like, or it's a teaching of our own, gaining our own abilities, creative abilities, to be part of the creation of all life, and to bring that through here now. This is simple as I can put it.
So some of the main characters that we all know from the Gospels, excuse me, Jesus or Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, the 12 disciples. Can you tell us a little bit about how you understand some of the main characters that we're going to be talking about in this class?
Yes, well, there's the relationship, let's say, with Yeshua, and at first John the Baptist. So we see these as aspects of our own awakening. We awaken first as the Baptist, John the Baptist, Johannes the Baptist, baptizer, and then we from there realize that our own spiritual is seeking to incarnate through us, within us. In that story really is the relationship between the formless spirit and form. So the formless spirit represented through the name Yeshua, you will have your own Yeshua body, and you have the psychosomatic and the soul, the soul represented by the awakened soul, in fact, represented by the baptizer, Johannes the baptizer.
So it sounds like, excuse me, it sounds like we're going to look at these great figures who typically we think of as historical figures outside of ourselves. You're really going to be teaching us how to embody these figures as parts of ourself and as part of the awakening process.
Yeah, what these figures point to in us is the awakened soul becoming at one with the spiritual body and then the divine presence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is available to us now.
I mean, it reminds.
And just to add,
yeah.
No, just to add quickly, sorry, that in this, of course, is the geometry of the tree of life.
Okay. Can you say more about that?
So that's another, yeah, it's an exploration. Basically, what we understand as the tree of life is in the landscape of the biblical story. So, I mean, this was well known by Christian mystics and Jewish mystics, and is the real reason behind pilgrimage, because we are walking through a landscape and within that landscape, we are undergoing psychological and physical changes as we awaken the spiritual and divine within us.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like as we follow the story of the gospel, we'll be learning techniques for initiation and further awakening as we walk through the landscape of the text and the landscape of the characters.
Yes, I mean, each lesson will take exercises from the book, really, which are there in the gospel, to become conscious of the breath, for example, to feel the aliveness of the awakened spine, which is the tree of life, of course, within us, to realize that we are a manifestation of the tree of life, and to have our own experiences of interconnectedness with the whole of creation, formation and making.
Mm-hmm. I mean, another wonderful character in the book is Mary Magdalene. Can you talk a little bit about how she fits into the Gospel of John?
Well, she, in fact, for me, became a major revelation as I was writing the book. I mean, I always understood that she was an important figure. And then as I was going through the texts, and not just the text of the Gospel of John, but also going back into the referenced text of the Hebrew Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Song of Songs, and the book of Joshua, realizing that she is effectively the spine of the gospel and represents the awakened human spine.
Wow, that's huge. That's quite the revelation. So in the gospel, will we be talking about how her relationship with Jesus, Yeshua? How will that unfold?
Yes, there's a lot of teachings on masculine and feminine and the polarity and balancing the polarity. So that in that co-creative, there are two aspects to co-creation, we could say, or three. One is that we are partners with the divine.
Mhm.
We are also partners with the manifest cosmos, psychosomatic cosmos. And we are also co-creators through understanding and knowing, more importantly, through gnosis, the relationship, conscious relationship between the masculine and feminine within us and as we relate to the people around us.
Mhm.
So it's an awakening that is holistic. And because the feminine has been so marginalized in not just in the Judeo-Christian religions, but also in our secular society,
Mhm.
and continues to be less so in, if you're fortunate enough to live in places like we do in France, or I was born and brought up in the UK, and you're in the United States, so there's a lot more freedom. But then nonetheless, this acknowledgement, this conscious acknowledgement of the feminine and what it really means to embody the spirit and the divine has been neglected.
This theme of
So the book is...
well, I'm just very aware that the theme of the sacred marriage, the inner sacred marriage between the feminine and the masculine, is a theme that keeps coming up over and over in all of the studies we've been doing. I know that one of the big images in the Gospel of John is the wedding at Cana. Can you talk about that? Does that have to do with the inner sacred marriage?
It is the inner sacred marriage, yes. It's the consummation of the marriage.
Okay.
And this is brought out in the text, not just at the marriage at Cana, which is the where the masculine and feminine consciously acknowledge each other, but also at the end of the gospel, where Mary recognizes the resurrected body, which means her own as well as Yoshua's. And there is this bringing through the teaching from the divine and spiritual into the physical universe, and connecting with the great circle of life. This is represented by the mother goddess aspect, but also by the 12 aspects of humanity, or the 12 disciples. And she relays the consciousness between the 12 aspects of humanity and the heart, or the center, the central axis, which is represented by the Christos Logos, pure consciousness.
Wow, you just brought up so many themes. So the 12 disciples, are you saying that they represent 12 different aspects of humanity, or the wholeness of humanity?
Yes, in the same way that we talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, there are 12 disciples. There are 12 signs of the zodiac, and there's a lot of astrological symbolism, as you're well aware, in the Gospels and in the Hebrew texts of the Torah and the other books of the Hebrew Bible.
Right. So you're saying that this, the Gospel of John really talks about how to achieve the inner sacred marriage internally, and also how to achieve it in terms of our connection with all of life, with all of humanity. So kind of a personal and collective unification. Is that right?
Yes, there's really it's this ability to, where this word turns up in the gospel over and over again, to be given the abilities of the divine and spiritual nature, whilst physically incarnate. It's the work of unification.
Right.
So the reason for existence isn't something that we have to escape from. It's that we bring the divine and we bring the heavenly universe to earth. This is often viewed as some kind of an impossible utopian dream, but the gospel clearly says that all the universes are present here now. Is our distracted, unconscious mind, which we've been conditioned to believe that these things are not within us, that they're not possible now.
Right.
And so this was stated 2,000 years ago, and it obviously needs to be restated now. So the teaching is how we consciously live in our physical lives, psychologically aware of the soul, aware of the spirit, and aware of the divine whilst we go about our daily lives. Now, obviously, there's fluctuations in the intensity of the consciousness, but that's not the concern of the gospel. The gospel is there to, which means good news. The good news is everything we need is here now to achieve this. We don't have to go to war. We don't have to wait for something else to happen. It's here now. All of these things that we've been told that we need something else or a series of other things to happen first are really swept away by the essential teachings of the gospel. It is that we are multidimensional beings in a multidimensional universe. And all of this is accessible to us when we consciously sustain this presence, represented through Joshua and the Mashiach Christos consciousness. That has to be brought through each individual human into the physical.
It's powerful. I'm just wondering about this, going back to the inner sacred marriage and the wedding at Cana. Can you talk a little bit more about the changing water into wine? And is that part of what you've just described? So coming fully into incarnation and being in the present moment now?
Yeah, there are exercises in the course that we'll be doing, and they're in the book, which is about how water is changed into wine. I don't mean that when you've done the course you'll be able to do that. Unfortunately, you'll still have to go to your wine merchant, but maybe some of you not. But anyway, the symbolism of the spirit, the heavenly spirit, the spiritual body, which is throughout all of existence, is a unifying presence, is symbolized by wine. And the psychological realm is symbolized by water. And it's the transformation taking place within the stone jars, which represent the physical.
Okay, that's beautiful.
And if you remember the text, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is there, and she gives her powers for him to perform the wine miracle.
Right.
She passes on those powers to him. She initiates. So the feminine, which is very much misunderstood and marginalized, is central in the Hebraic Kabbalistic tradition, of which John's Gospel is a part. I'll go into that a bit later, the languages, but basically it comes from this Hebraic Kabbalistic tradition. And in that, the feminine is the initiator of every evolutionary step in consciousness,
Right.
in raising consciousness. So this is presented in the Gospels as well.
Okay. Can you say something now about the Hebrew, the Greek, and the Aramaic, and how that weaves into the Gospel of John?
Yes, well, all of the mystical teachings originate in what we call biblical Hebrew, in which the Torah and the books that have been canonized in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, are written. Now that ancient language is a process of meditation in itself. It's a hieroglyphic symbol, and it can be translated into other languages in the way that we would say translate Latin into modern English or French. So it takes a different approach, and all the people that transmitted the teachings that have become John's Gospel, or that are in John's Gospel, were steeped in this Hebraic Kabbalah. The Gospels themselves were orally transmitted, so they would have been spoken, the teachings would have been spoken in Aramaic and also in Greek to the Hellenistic Jews.
Right.
Who, some of whom lived in Palestine, ancient Palestine, and some of whom lived in the diaspora in places like Alexandria or Ephesus in Asia Minor.
Mm-hmm.
So they were very, very important communities. So the Gospels would have been, once they started to be written down, were written simultaneously in Greek and in Aramaic for the different language groups. The version that we draw upon in, the Christian traditions of the Western world come from the Greek text with Aramaic phrases translated or transliterated into Greek, ancient Greek, and they also continually reference teachings from the Hebrew texts, which Christians have misappropriated with the name Old Testament, right. The Hebrew Testament, which is the source of much of the teachings. Mm-hmm. And I know that Christians say that it centers around Yeshua or Jesus. His teachings are steeped in Hebraic mysticism. Mm-hmm. At the time, it was called Merkabah, and then between the 1st, 2nd centuries and the 10th, 11th centuries, the word Kabbalah began to be used, and that's the same tradition. It's just been given different names. Mm-hmm.
What I've really gained from your teachings over the years is that it really, these teachings bring us back to the self and to the cosmos, so that we recognize that we're co-creators in this process, rather than seeing these biblical stories as something outside of ourselves. But we're really taking seriously how these teachings are really about spiritual metaphysics and how we actually ascend within the body, how we awaken fully within the body here and now. So that's what I've really appreciated about your teachings. And I'm really excited to be digging into this Gospel of John, because it has even more instruction about how to, what I would call, how to work with our spiritual technology that's within the body.
Yes, it is exactly as you said. And the Merkaba teachings are embedded into the teachings. Yeah. Yeah, and this is it is the work of unification, and we are literally, as we spiritually awaken, affecting the universe, and the universe can then meet us to reflect back that renewed consciousness in a new way. That's why they speak of, in some of the texts, creating a new heaven and a new earth. Certainly, the heaven that is described as a new heaven is always new, because creativity is always now, and it's always the cutting edge of where we are. Behold, I make all things new, as it says in one of the texts. So we are then applying that, or bringing that, incarnating that into the physical. And then our perception of the physical changes. We realize we are in sacred space, which is always here.
Right. Yeah. That reminds me of another theme that we have been talking about, you and I have been talking about, where the disciples throw out the net. I think that's what you're talking about, where we throw out the net, but the net represents the network of the interconnectedness of all of life. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, the finishing scene is a teaching story of where Jesus is walking on the beach, or Joshua is walking on the beach, and he sees the disciples' ability to understand the interconnectedness of everything everywhere, throughout the four universes that we use in Kabbalah. So it is the ability to understand that the divine is present in everything, that is in Asiya and in Yetzirah. So I don't want to go too much into it, because we'll do that in the course, but yes, the casting of the net is a reorientation into seeing into this multidimensional universe as a multidimensional being. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Are there any other major themes that you want to talk about that we're going to be covering from the Gospel of John?
Well, just that Mary Magdalene, really, just to reiterate that she's run through the entire Gospel.
Okay.
And she is the initiator. And that although she's marginalized to a certain extent in the Gospel, there is this invisible presence, which is the conscious connection between heaven and earth.
Okay.
So it's very important that we restore this. And so we'll be doing some exercises around that as well.
Great. Well, this is going to be such a rich series of classes. It's, for me anyway, it's really important to reclaim these images, the wedding at Cana, Mary Magdalene, John the Baptist, Jesus, understanding these really important characters in a way that can make sense for our own awakening. So thank you so much, Steve, for all the work that you've done over the years. And I really so appreciate that you're going to be leading us in this series of classes.
Thank you. Yeah, and look forward to working with you as always.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.